even if the song itself, like the instrumentally is, completely different, right? Even if the instrumentation of it is completely different. Like, I think we're better off doing that than trying to make it sound like the offering someone else made to God.
Hello and welcome to the Sound Doctrine podcast. My name's Caleb.
My name's Keaton.
And my name's Will. We are here to talk about worship and how it influences God's people.
We're going to dive into the lyrics we sing and the church practices we participate in each week and how they influence your congregation.
Whether you're a church leader, congregant, or someone just interested in worship, join us as we encounter Sound Doctrine. And here we are again with another episode coming at you. Sound Doctrine, episode 5. How we doing, boys?
Man, it's been a time. What you guys don't know, this is our second take of doing this episode with who we will introduce. But, in between that, we thought we were recording, finished it, we're not recording, and then a minute after that, my wife called me, and she got in a wreck because there's a blizzard going on here.
A blizzard? That's a loose term.
Yeah.
There's like a 2 inches of snow.
Like 4 inches
yeah,
of
there's
snow.
4. It's coming down.
Oh, yeah. It's tough out there right
and
now.
Marianne does not know how to shovel.
No, they're not. They're not salting the road.
No,
either.
no. So, but here we are.
We're here.
Yeah.
God said you need 2 takes.
You need take 2.
So
here we are.
Yeah.
Here we are.
With the Sound Doctrine first, we have our first guest to the podcast,
Hello.
Luke McEvoy.
How's it going?
Luke, he has his own YouTube channel, Everyday Church Guitarist. We go to the same church. He's one of our main music directors at the church that we work at. But most importantly, Luke is one of my good friends, one of the first people I ever met on campus. And we've just hung out basically my entire college career.
We've done a lot of stuff together.
A lot of weird stuff. If you were to ask, we've
made a lot of different kinds of music together, realistically.
all over the country.
Yeah, all over the country.
And Canada.
I forgot about Canada.
International musician.
What happened in Canada?
We don't talk about
that's a
Canada.
whole
That's a
other
story for
podcast.
another time, Keith.
That's a different podcast.
We'll get
I got
there.
it.
Was that when you got left? Was that the same time you guys got left in Niagara Falls?
Different time.
Different time.
Okay.
Different time. We were actually not in Canada that time.
We were
Yeah,
still
okay.
together though.
Yep, we were still together.
No,
Yep, when we got left in Niagara Falls, every single person there had to Uber their way to the Olive Garden.
Yep.
yeah, don't trust your bus driver to get
Amen.
gas.
Man, she might be in Buffalo.
Yep.
Well, importantly, Luke, where can they follow your YouTube channel, and then maybe give them a little taste about what Everyday Church Guitarist is?
Yeah. So, like you said, my channel is Everyday Church Guitarist. It's been going for a few months now. You can check that out over there. My goal with that channel is kind of showing that you don't need to spend exorbitant amounts of money on the gear that you're playing for worship, and you can still get those very similar sounds as a worship guitarist without. You see all these people online building these huge boards that are super expensive with all these expensive guitars, and you can get a lot of those same sounds and do really well in worship with spending a lot less money. Because I'm an everyday guy. I work a 9 to 5. I play on the weekends at church, and so that's the budget I work off of. And so I know there's a lot of other musicians like that too that can't pour thousands into this thing. So that's kind of the way that I am. But also looking at what it means to be a worship team member and play in church and be a part of the team as a whole, not just walk in there, play your part and leave, or walk in there, read a chord chart and get out of there. But it's being a part of the team and being genuinely involved in worship, not just playing music, So kind of looking at those things. So you can check me out over on my channel, Everyday Church Guitarist. I would love it if you did that. But,
Awesome.
yeah.
Love it.
That's great. So we brought you in here for a specific reason, and that reason is tracks. We know as, Caleb and I, maybe not Keaton.
Yeah.
Keaton doesn't.
I have no idea what we're talking about today.
Yep.
Yeah.
Keaton plays trombone.
Yeah.
Trombone. The most useful instrument in a worship setting.
Yeah. the one instrument that, in fact, there's probably a track for it, but probably not.
I'm sure we could find a song with a trombone track in it.
Yeah.
We do. We do have one.
We have
We
one?
have one. It is the choral anthem version of "I Speak Jesus."
So we
Fantastic.
don't even need that track because we'll just have Keaton.
We'll just have Keaton
Yeah.
do it.
But
We
anyways,
can double them up.
That was awesome. Yeah. Keaton and the track.
yeah.
Sounds like a weird band.
Keaton and the track.
Keaton
That's my
and the
band.
Track.
Yeah, that's my band name.
But me and Caleb know that you have an opinion that some people in the worship realm may also have, and that Caleb also has an opinion that some people and neither of them are wrong.
And I wouldn't say they're terribly different.
No. Our last try of doing this, we figured that out. Actually.
Yeah, we realized that. Yeah.
We found some common ground at least.
Yeah.
We're gonna find again.
Yes.
Find it again.
In a better way, because that's what the Lord wants.
Yeah, I guess the Lord wanted us to have this conversation a second time, and that's okay.
He's like,
That's
it's a little heated in this room right now.
Yeah.
We're just gonna
It is
dial
pretty
down.
warm in here, unironically,
Yeah.
but that's okay.
But-
Before we talk about tracks,
Okay, yeah.
I wanted to, we were trying to figure out like maybe what are some questions that we could ask all of our guests.
Yeah.
And I just wanted to ask you, like, how did you get into worship ministry?
Man.
Like, what's your calling? How did you start? And then, like, just like that whole journey for you. What did that look like?
Yeah. So, unlike a lot of people, I don't remember one specific moment where I felt like I was called to ministry. Like, so a lot of people have that one specific moment where it's like, oh my gosh, God wants me to do ministry. Like, I kind of just knew it. I think. I've grown up in a ministry household. My dad was a pastor for a while. But even when my parents weren't in full-time ministry, like they were involved.
Yeah.
And my parents are both musicians too. And so I was just kind of always around it. I've been playing music since the second grade, taking piano lessons and things like that, which is funny because I don't play piano now. But so I've kind of always been kind of surrounded by music and ministry of various kinds. And, coming up through like mid to late high school, I was leading worship for youth group and things like that, and I'm like, I feel like this is what I'm supposed to do.
Yeah.
Like I think this is what I should be doing with the rest of my life. This is what God wants for me. And so, I went to Indiana Wesleyan, pursued a degree in worship studies, music ministry, which I graduated with nearly 2 years ago now, which is weird. But graduated with that, and kind of just been, I go to church with you guys, and I've been doing the music stuff there with y'all for a good long while. And so I think that's kind of the progression of things. I just kind of felt like this is what God wants me to do.
That's awesome. That's awesome.
Okay, another question. What is the way that you worship God in a daily setting?
Ooh.
Mm-hmm.
Like what? And then another one after that is, what's your favorite worship song to listen to right now?
Yeah.
So
In a daily setting, I think I've noticed this thing about myself in the last few years where regardless of what is going on, my first instinct is pray. Like usually it's just silently in my head, but it's just like whatever I'm thinking about, whatever's going on, it's just like I start praying.
Yeah.
And it's funny because like sometimes it'll be something like completely selfish, and then I'll recognize that partway through. I'm like, I'm praying for this completely selfish thing right now that I don't even need to be praying about. But like, so then I'll switch. I'll be like, God, fix my heart a little bit. But yeah, my go-to in so many things is to pray, but also to like, because I work a regular, like I work in a warehouse. I do warehouse work, and so doing the best that I can to show Christ to those people too.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, I'm not perfect, obviously,
Yeah.
but showing Christ to those people too, and it's cool. This is kind of a little aside, but it's kind of the point there where it's like people know that I'm the guy that like I have a ministry degree. Like I'm like in that world, and so like I'll have people ask me questions about church and ministry and things like that, and people who have no idea anything about it, or people who have like they'll know a little bit about church, or maybe they grew up in it but they don't do it anymore. Even just this week I was having some really good conversations with people there too. So that's kind of ways that I present that worship in my daily life is by praying a lot and talking with people about it.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Okay, so now what is your favorite worship song that you are actively listening to right now?
That I'm actually listening to. Trusting God is like my favorite worship song. Right now,
That's a banger.
I love that song. It's my favorite one to play right now. I think one of them. It's like Trusting God and Goodbye Yesterday are both like my favorites to play. But as far as listening to, I think Trusting God's probably my favorite one.
That's awesome.
Yeah. Love that song.
So
Keaton loves Goodbye Yesterday.
Goodbye Yesterday it's on my list of songs that I need God to work in my heart with.
This episode isn't released yet. It's releasing
next week.
This next week,
Yeah.
which obviously will already have been released to you guys.
Yeah.
But we talked about like how to introduce new worship songs, and Keaton's
Yeah.
like, I hated when we did Goodbye Yesterday all those times in youth group.
Yeah, it's growing on me. It's getting there. But I find it funny how God has just continued to bring the song back up in my life. So I don't know if this is just a way that he's like, hey, buddy,
It's
you
okay,
settle
Keaton.
down. It's not as bad as what you think.
Calm down.
It's okay, Keaton, because when me and my wife went to her house for Christmas, my wife also is like, felt the same way Keaton did.
Sure.
Keaton's not alone.
It's not a bad opinion.
Yeah.
fine.
It's okay.
It's the right opinion.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
He goes, it's the right opinion, he says.
But so we went to her house, and she has two siblings that are younger than her. One of them is in 8th grade, the other one is in 6th grade. And like the first day we got back there, they were like, goodbye, yes, And
Hey, don't sing anymore.
I know, yeah.
Right.
And she's like, how do you know that song? And I was like, Kenzie, it's not Elevation Rhythm.
Like, it's not like we wrote it.
Yeah,
Like,
I
like,
wish.
it is a big, honestly, it's like it is a well-known song.
Yeah.
Okay, just because we hadn't heard it does not mean that the world hasn't. But
yeah.
those are both really good ones.
And I wouldn't even say it's like a particularly deep song
No,
lyrically, but it's like, it's hype and it's kind of fun to play, and it's still like the lyrics have some meaning to them and they're worshipful. So
Yeah.
yeah, it's a good one.
I love it.
Awesome. Okay, well,
So Keaton, just get a better opinion.
yeah.
Okay, fine. Wow.
If you can work on that for me, I'd appreciate it.
Anything for you, Luke.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Yeah.
So now that the audience has gotten to hear just a little bit about you, your background, and your heart for worship, your heart for leading worship on the stage, we would love to now hear your opinion on tracks. Let's get into this nitty gritty a little bit about what you believe when it comes to tracks and their place in the church.
Yeah. So tracks, I think, can be a useful tool. If you're careful not to rely on them too much. So tracks, I think they can be good if you rehearsed with the musicians that you had, and then Sunday morning you get a call from your keys player. They're like, "Hey, I'm sick. I've been up all night. I really can't make it in there." You can very comfortably tell your musician, "Hey, stay home. Don't worry about it. Feel better. Praying for you," and turn on the keys track.
Yeah,
they can be really good for that. But I think other than that, other than like a last resort thing, I think there's a lot of value in just live instrumentals because it's more authentic, and I think the authenticity in worship is really, really important. And so I think most of the time you're better off working with what you've got than filling in instruments that aren't there with a track.
Yeah.
And just for our listeners out there, and this includes myself, who might not know what tracks are, who are kind of unfamiliar to the worship realm. What is a track to you guys who know?
So tracks, they basically it'll be a pre-recorded version of like individual instruments that you can turn on and off throughout to either fill in some gaps or like I said, be a backup if someone can't get there last minute. So it'll be like an individual recorded keys track or an individual recorded electric guitar track, and you can turn individual instruments on and off as you need them or as you want to use them. So it's just a pre-recorded version that would kind of play along with you.
Yeah, Keaton, it's like you ever played with GarageBand? Like when I
first got my Mac, way back when, like when Mac, like the Mac lapbook, like laptop, not laptop,
lapbook, the MacBook.
Keaton, about 90.
Man,
90-year-old Keaton.
These conversations make me seem really dumb with technology. I promise. I know a little bit.
Yeah.
I believe you.
But yeah, when I got my laptop for the first time, it obviously GarageBand's like automatically downloaded.
Yeah, that's what it is.
Yeah.
So it's like, man, the days of me just trying to become a young musician with pre-recorded tracks.
Yep.
So what a time.
And you can isolate the audio. The funny thing is, like, you can actually make tracks from your Sunday recording, technically, if you really wanted to.
Oh, yeah, you could.
Yep.
Yeah, if you multi-track record it.
Yeah, you can make your own tracks.
Right.
Which we've done. You've used tracks that you've made, right?
Yeah. I've spent some time making my own tracks. They're fun to make.
Yeah. You're
But
just
yeah.
recording the same song 11 times on a different instrument every time.
Right. It's a fun little challenge.
Just see if you can do it.
Yeah, why not?
And you can just, I mean, and there's so many ways you can do it too. Like,
Oh, yeah.
you can just take a keyboard and like use the guitar effect. No, it's not gonna sound as good at all.
You certainly could
But
do
you
it.
could use a keyboard and
option.
make everything.
MIDI guitar.
Yeah, MIDI guitar, MIDI trombone.
Ooh, MIDI trombone.
So,
But
you go. You good?
but so now that we kind of have an idea of what
Yeah.
tracks are, Caleb, can you give us an idea of like softwares that would be used widely on a church basis for tracks?
Yeah, sure. So there's, I'd say 3, maybe 4 main ways to do tracks. One is probably the most famous, Ableton Live. That is a DAW or digital audio workstation that you're able to put in all of your tracks, and then you can use your tracks. You're able to trigger them the same way you can all these other tracks, but it gives you a little bit more flexibility about where you go, how your arrangements are set up. You can also then use any effect, right? So if you're wanting to, instead of having a song fade in, fade out, if you wanted to use like a low pass filter or maybe something a little bit more complex than just a fader, you're able to like throw those in as well. But then there's 2 pre-made ways as well. There's Multitracks' playback app, which gives you a lot more flexibility with some of those other effects. You do have to use Multitracks, their tracks that they
they've made.
provide.
Yeah.
Yep. And then the other option is Loop Community, their Prime app. So Loop Community that's what we use.
Yep.
So you're able to use 3 main different types of tracks. Your own tracks, which we have a few that I've put together for, like, if we have like a weird arrangement of like
Yeah.
Holy, 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 and We Fall Down. Like that's one where I made a little something, something. And then we have the community tracks. Loop Community is called Loop Community because they have all these other worship leaders that are making tracks for their own churches.
It's really cool.
Yeah.
I love
it's awesome.
community-driven stuff. like that.
Absolutely. Sometimes
Especially in the
it's better.
worship realm
Yeah,
too.
for
Like,
sure.
So you have their community tracks, and then you also have the master recordings.
Yep.
So you're able to get elevations, rendering
Yep.
of their own song
Yep.
with your band. So I'd say those are like the 3 types of ways that you can run tracks.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think. Sorry, I'm a little scatterbrained because
You're
I'm.
good.
But
Why?
the already doing this, I'm trying to, but
Yeah.
so you kind of shared what tracks were. I want to hear kind of your opinion, Caleb's opinion, and then even maybe sprinkle in Keaton's view as a congregation member,
Yeah.
and we can kind of just go from there because I think
Yeah.
there's a lot that we can get in from there.
Yeah.
So
So I think I kind of talked about what I thought already. So I want to.
Yeah.
Let's talk about it. Let's
Sure.
hear Caleb.
So I would say probably, and Luke, you could probably agree with this, is that like my opinion is constantly changing in some ways.
Okay,
Maybe not. That's been my
it's
experience.
evolved, I would say.
Yeah, like what I first started out believing with tracks is not what I believe now. Now that we've used them for like what, 2 years?
Yeah. A year and a half,
Close.
2 years, something like
Yeah.
that. Yeah.
Now that we've had a little more experience, my opinions changed a little bit. So when we first started using tracks at the church we're at, I was gung ho. I was like, we have to use every track though, right? Like anything that we couldn't replicate in the room, I wanted to have in the track.
Yeah.
Just my mentality was, how can we make this the biggest sounding we can?
Right.
And that's not a bad thing to do. It's not what I would do now, but it's not a bad way to run tracks. But then over time, it was like, okay, sure, we could have Luke and 5 electric tracks, but why?
But
Yeah.
why?
Now, if there's a good reason, like if there's like a part of the song that you're like, man, the congregation would benefit from this, right? Like especially if your keys player is like can't come in,
Yeah.
sure. Or if there's like, if your drummer is struggling and they could really like they can't find beat 2 and there's a tambourine that comes in on beat 2,
Yeah.
like use
Amazing.
that.
Yeah.
But I would probably use a few more tracks than Luke would. Like I would probably keep in percussion tracks and some keys tracks.
I would say you would use a few more than me too, given that I would use none.
Yeah.
Right, exactly. So
You would use. I could say that you would use more than
I
one,
would,
actually.
yeah.
Yeah.
So my philosophy of tracks is how can we sound a little bit more like ourselves, but still sound somewhat like the recording?
Yeah.
Could we add in the vocal effects that make it sound like the recording so that it's still us, but still an homage back to the artist? That's like where my mentality goes. Now I'm totally okay if we don't use tracks.
Yeah.
That does not.
Yeah.
But if I was going to pick one or the other, I'd be like, I'd rather have this one to have the flexibility to be like, oh yeah, that'd be cool. But yeah, so similar in some
I
ways.
see what you mean. Yeah.
In some ways, but also you would use some track.
Yeah.
You would use really no tracks.
Yeah,
and
yeah.
I would use as minimal as possible.
Yeah. Like I think I would have the tracks. I would like to have tracks ready to go for like that specific thing where like someone calls me a Sunday morning like, hey, I really
Absolutely.
can't be there. I'm like, okay, we already rehearsed this way. We're just gonna put the tracks in there. But I think on a regular basis, I would prefer to just work with the musicians that I've got and shift the sound to that. So
Sure.
if like a lot of people declined, I only have like an acoustic player, keys player, maybe like a drummer. And that's as far as I've got with instrumentals. So I mean, I'd be like, okay, got acoustic and keys. That's great. Maybe we switch to a more more acoustic-ish feel. Maybe we switch that drummer into a cajon, or have it feel like a smaller set or a more acoustic kind of set. Because I would rather just work with what we've got, because I don't see any reason to make it sound like the recording. I don't think. I think that's a new thing that's happened.
Yeah.
In the last, 20 years, probably, people have really, started kind of pushing to sound more like the recording, because worship has become so produced. And so I think we kind of push to replicate it a lot.
For sure.
Rather than just, having these songs that we've written or that have been written for the church to use and playing it. I think there's too much of a push to sound like it did on the radio. And I don't see a reason to do that. And so I think that's one downside to tracks to me. There's kind of another thing with tracks for me too, is I also really value giving God the best we can as musicians.
Sure.
And I think putting tracks there, it makes it so the musicians are often going to put in less work. It puts less responsibility on the musicians themselves to really learn it and everything, really know the song well. Because like, I can just
Fall
do
back on
what
a
the recording's doing.
Sure.
Like, it's just there's a recording going. I'll just go with it. Or something like that. It takes the responsibility off of the musicians.
Yeah.
And I don't think doing that is putting our musicians in a position where they're like pushed to give God the best that they can.
Yeah.
Because they're just playing along with recording rather than making the music and leading the music.
Yeah, I would agree with that for sure. Like tracks can become a handicap.
Yeah.
And when we use tracks in terms of like seasons of our church, if you think of like each church has like a season.
Yeah.
Like there should be a time where like there's a time of training where we're teaching our people like, hey, like this is how you become a good musician. And being kind of like out in the open, a little bit exposed, not behind the tracks, is important for that.
Yeah.
But they also allow them to be like, this is how that sounds.
Yeah.
So yeah, I would totally agree with that.
Yeah, and that's where they're great for like a practice tool too. Like,
Sure.
I absolutely love using like rehearsal tracks for my own practice times.
Yeah.
Because it helps me learn the parts so much. Because I learn so much of what I learn by ear or by watching, even more than I learn it by looking at a tab or a lead sheet or something like that. That's almost not helpful to me at all.
Sure.
Learning something. I if I can hear it and if I can hear it and I can watch someone do it, it's super easy for me to learn something. So I love tracks for that purpose, for using them as a rehearsal tool, definitely. But yeah, I just don't love using them live.
Okay. I have it's like sort of leads away from tracks, but what is like where is the opinion? Because like you said, you don't like tracks because it causes laziness and maybe artificialness.
Yeah.
Where this is kind of off topic, but to me feels where do you think the line draws from like using effects then? Like using effects on like how do you think that takes away from the authentic? Oh wow, I'm not gonna be able to say it,
Authenticity?
yeah, there we go. Of like a Sunday then, if your opinion on tracks is like it can take away from what is happening, like what do you think that line is from using effects?
Like effects, you mean like guitar effects and like delay and reverb and on the keys and stuff like
even
that?
if like you use a vocal effect or something like.
Yeah, so that's different to me because it's not something that's pre-recorded. You're still originating the sound. Yeah. So like I'm the electric player. I run through a board's worth of pedals.
Oh yeah.
But I'm still the one originating that sound.
Sure.
I'm still the one who set all of that sound, and it's happening because I'm actively doing it. And it's the same like a keys player. Like Caleb's put a patch together, and it's all of the sound is running through all of that sound that he has set up, but it's still somebody playing it physically down there.
Yep.
So the sound is still originating from an actual musician right away.
100%.
Yeah, it makes sense. I just, I could see people being like, wow, he doesn't like tracks, but like...
Realistically, the effects are part of the instrument.
Yeah.
Especially with something like electric guitar and keys. The effects that are on it are part of the instrument.
Yeah.
And, looking at something like a vocal with like putting a little reverb on it, that's just a mixing thing. That just makes it sit into the mix a little more. So that's a lot different to me than just playing a pre-recorded version.
Yeah, that's fair. What's up, guys? We hope that you guys are enjoying this episode, and we just want to take a moment, remind you to subscribe on YouTube, leave some comments, share with your friends, and hit that bell icon on whatever platform you are listening to.
If you have not yet, please go and check out our exclusive partner, the Worship Warehouse. Link will be in the description. And you are a worship leader, or maybe someone who's just interested more in worship. They have some resources there that they would love to get into your hands. So please check them out.
Make sure to like us on all of our social medias at the Sound Doctrine Podcast. Check out our socials where you can get our clips, quotes, and more information about when we're dropping our new episodes. Now, with all that said, let's go back to the episode. Another, complaint that some people have is that they will say that like tracks will control where they go, right? If there's a specific arrangement and this is where they're going, that they're kind of stuck to that. Obviously, we've messed around with arrangements.
Yeah, you can change the arrangement around.
We'll go wherever. But like, what would you say, especially for someone if they don't know how to use the software? Like, how would you, if they came to you asking for like advice on, if let's say they're going to use, even if it's just clicks and cues, right? How would you maybe best help them understand like how to best use the tracks for their advantage and maybe when to turn them off?
Yeah, I think you have to understand the context of the moment that you're using it in, So if you're playing like coming out of like underneath of something, like maybe you started out playing quiet, like underneath a prayer or a little announcement or something, and then you're kind of bringing it up into the song, maybe you're better off just running a straight click for a while, letting that run, and then just bringing it in with the band. Or, you can do like a quick transition or something. But I do kind of think that is another downfall of tracks is you lose your flexibility a lot. Like you have the flexibility in terms of you can redo the arrangement.
Sure.
And set it up ahead of time however you want. But you then lose a lot of that flexibility. And even using cues, I think cues can be really valuable because they can help keep the band together. But also you still lose a lot of that flexibility to move. And it also, cues can kind of make it feel like, what's the point of having a music director?
Yeah.
If the recordings can tell me exactly where to go anyway. But that's a different thing. But that's a different conversation. But I don't know. I think a lot of moments are good to just use. If it's kind of meant to be a time where you're gonna free flow a little bit, you don't want to be completely locked into that, then run a click, let the click be. Just kind of let it run as long as it wants to run until you tell it to stop.
Sure.
For a lot of those things. So I don't know if that answered the question or not. But
yeah. Okay, if you had somebody coming to you that like was leading worship at a church and was like, "Hey, Luke, I want to start using tracks for my church."
Yeah.
How would you best help them? Like, and they're like, "How should I do this?" As somebody who doesn't like tracks,
right.
How would you maybe like help them through that conversation of being like, because like it's not like you don't understand tracks.
Yeah. I'd be like, I'd say, first of all, don't. Second of all, I'll help you. Here's how.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I don't know Ableton and stuff super well. So my default would be set them up with Prime. You know, I know how to get around that pretty easily. It's super intuitive to learn, even in a little bit of time that I spent with that app.
Keaton can do it.
Yeah, Keaton could do it.
Wow.
You know, I believe that Keaton could do it.
I've been
honestly.
so good. I've been
That's
sitting
the
here
thing.
quietly listening and then jab.
I believe that you could do it.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Fantastic.
No, like that would be the way to go, especially for someone who, you know, they don't know all these softwares or anything like that, which is kind of where I'm at too.
Yeah, just getting started.
It is like it's the easiest entry, the one with the lowest barrier of entry, I think, to get into tracks would be using Prime and Loop Community, and also I think there's a lot. I think it's really good to have community support for something like that.
100%.
Like a lot of the things that I like to use for my guitars too, like the Tonex or you know, the Helix stuff. They have huge communities around them that are making all this stuff for them, and so that's why I think I would help set someone up with Prime. But I would also, you know, getting into the specifics of how to use tracks in your service, I would tell them, you know, if you really do want to use them very supplementally. Supplementarily, I think is the word that I'm supposed to use. But use them like that. Don't make those the star of the show. Don't like use this super prominent track to fill in for someone that's not there. They kind of, if you're going to use them, they kind of need to sit in the background and into your mix of the rest of your band. Because if you have, you know, this, like we talked about Goodbye Yesterday earlier. If you have Goodbye Yesterday going and that like heavy electric line comes in right at the beginning and there is no one on stage playing it. Yeah. Like I know if I was sitting in the congregation, I'd be like, what's going on? Yeah. Like who's playing that?
Ghost guitar.
Are they in the back? Like
they're behind the curtain.
Are they standing behind the back wall? Are they in the key room? Like what's going on? So I would definitely say if you really do want to use tracks, make sure you give them to your team ahead of time to use as a rehearsal resource, as a practice resource, because that is what I think tracks are really, really good for. But then in a live setting, use them very, very sparingly and very supplementally.
Yeah.
We've been talking a lot about Prime, so I want to take a second, look right in that camera, and say, Matt McEvoy, if you would love to sponsor this podcast,
please,
you're more than welcome.
Yeah,
we would love to talk about Prime.
If you want to
all
actually
day
come
long.
on the podcast, that would
also be cool.
You can have this chair. I'll go.
Yeah.
So just gonna throw that out there.
Here.
Just gonna throw that out there. But Keaton, you know, you bring a different perspective because you haven't played with the click. You didn't know what a track was until whenever we started this like 20 minutes ago.
Yeah.
Well.
Yeah,
I mean, like,
still.
yeah.
You may have heard it. But
2 hours ago, he learned what.
Besides the other episode that was recorded just momentarily before
that
this.
wasn't recorded actually, specifically.
It was not recorded, but we did it.
But like from a congregation standpoint, I guess it's a twofold question. How does it make you feel when someone says that they're using tracks? Right. What is your immediate gut reaction? And then like. How would, since being an IWU and now joining like the church that we're a part of, coming from like different experiences, how have you, and if any, have you seen like the difference between tracks and no tracks in a church?
So yeah, I'll answer that first question. I think the reality is like 90% of the congregation isn't going to care. Like they're not really going to notice the tracks are even there in the first place. Unless, obviously, like, we're playing an instrument that isn't even on stage and it's really noticeable. Then I think people might question things. But reality is, most of the time, we're not even going to know. I didn't know that tracks even existed until, like, 2 years ago when I actually started getting in conversations with y'all, in which you guys talk about tracks and clicks almost in every conversation.
He thought that a ghost was playing.
I was like, man, who is playing that wicked, like, guitar?
He's like, there's only acoustic, but...
Turns out it was just, you know, somebody else.
Yep.
But I think as far as like it goes for me, like I think it goes back to something you said earlier, which was about authenticity. And again, like our podcast is named Sound Doctrine because everything we talk about within the worship world, rather that be just in practice, it has ties to our theology and into Scripture as a whole. And the reality is, I'm trying to sit here and process like where does tracks fit within our theology and our belief in Scripture. And like, kind of where I sit is like, I understand like, oh, someone calls in sick.
Yeah.
Perfectly okay. I'm fine with you being like, hey, we're gonna put on a piano track for this morning. But I have I think, strong opinions when it comes to, hey, we're just going to fill the room with sound.
Yeah.
Because the reality is, I might not be a part of the worship team. I might not, know how to play an instrument. Might be not on the stage singing or playing that instrument. However, I am actually still a part of the worship experience. Because
Sure
the
hope
reality
so.
is, because the reality is, I'm singing along with you.
Mm-hmm.
I'm up
Right.
there, like the words are on the screen. I'm singing along. So I am a part of that offering that we're bringing to God, because that's what worship is. It's our offering. It's us laying these words and these things on this altar before God and saying, "This is for you. This is our worship before you." And I think if we just play with tracks, I feel like that authenticity of that offering is kind of tainted a little bit. I mean, think for a moment, and I mean, this is an outrageous thing to think about. Would be picture we have a band who's not using tracks.
Mm-hmm.
But the congregation's not singing at all, and we just pre-recorded an audience.
Yeah.
Like that
would feel weird the other way.
That's
Yeah,
not
true.
that's not true worship, in my opinion.
Right.
Yeah.
So it's like, why would it be any different the other way around?
Right.
So like,
This guy.
I think there's value in
He
the
says
fact.
good stuff every once in a while.
Yeah,
Why he's around,
broken clocks twice a day. So
Yeah.
but the reality is, like, we are offering something to God, and like, to be honest, God doesn't care if it sounds good.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Like, that's just the reality of it. So the reality is, like, is what we're offering from us, and is it being holy and pleasing to God out of an act of obedience, because God calls us to worship.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Now I understand, like, again, someone's sick, we need
Throw it
someone
in
to fill in.
Yeah.
But I don't think it's okay when we're just trying to fill the space, because
Yeah.
our voices as the congregation should be what's filling the walls of the church.
Yeah.
I 100% agree with
Well,
you.
and I think too, I think everyone here would agree that there's a line that no matter what, you don't. It's not a concert. Worship is not a concert,
right.
Not at all.
And so
It doesn't need to sound the
Yeah,
biggest and
yeah.
fullest that it can all the time.
and
Yeah.
so no matter if you love tracks or you hate them, your heart, no matter what. Again, we talk so much worship is heart posture,
Yeah.
and so if your heart's in it for it to be the best production, it's not going to be good worship.
Right.
If you're doing it though because you truly believe that it's going to help encourage your congregation to engage in worship, way different.
Yeah.
But we talked, in the episode that did
That
not
didn't
get
get on
recorded.
here, yeah.
I made the point that it'd be very funny if you had the worship pastor up there with just a microphone and the whole band was tracks.
The whole band was trying. Like, it would be goofy.
It
Yeah.
would feel a little weird,
Yeah.
But I think it comes down to the point in that we all, it has to come from your heart, and it has to come from no matter what you believe. If it's not benefiting your congregation, if it's not raising up the church,
Right.
what's
What's the point?
What's the
Yeah.
point? There's always going to be new technology and new innovations for us to worship God.
Yep.
The early church was not using tracks.
Nope. They sure weren't.
Paul did not write to Romans and was
No.
like, I don't like your use of tracks.
Hey, please stop using
Yeah.
tracks.
You
You guys aren't using click enough.
yeah. Your tempo's off.
Yeah.
But,
Your drummer sucks. Get a metronome.
yeah, so there's always going to be innovations and there's always going to be
Yeah.
polarizing opinions. That doesn't even change. That hasn't changed even with the terms of what worship music is.
Yeah. Yeah.
30 years ago, is the sound that was coming out of worship music is not the same sound
Right.
that we're hearing today.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so it has to come from your heart,
Yeah.
Yeah.
And-
Well, and that's sorry.
Go ahead.
Okay. So
You're the guest here. I'm not gonna.
you're good. You're good. That's the thing for me is we've gotten to the point where worship has become an industry, and it has become
100%.
it's become a genre.
Yeah.
And
Which is awesome.
No,
I
don't
love-
even think that
okay,
that's
I love-
Here's the thing.
Worship
I
as a
like,
genre.
Sorry, let me
Yeah,
say,
sorry, worship
as
is
a
a genre. That's what I thought was awesome.
So no, I like the sound of a lot of modern worship music. I
Yeah,
like that
yeah.
sound, but I think I don't think there's any reason that all worship needs to sound like that.
For sure.
And
Oh,
that's
yeah.
That's a thing that I think, we, you look at the community of worship leaders. There's a push that a lot of people make, that a lot of modern worship leaders are making, that we sound like those songs. We sound like that, and that's how I feel. That's how I feel about the tracks. Is we're using that as a push towards that produced worship industry
Yeah.
sound, and I don't think I think we're better off trying to take those songs and play them as our own. You know, even if the song itself, like the instrumentally is, you know, completely different, right? Even if the instrumentation of it is completely different. Like I think we're better off doing that than trying to make it sound like the offering someone else made to God.
Yeah, I think you bring up an amazing point. You know, back to the early church, like they were reading Psalms, they were, you know, they were praising their own way, and it was that way for so long. If you look at church history, and I mean, don't get me wrong, like it is hard. You know, I love that worship music is now a very recognized genre of music, and I think that's amazing, and God is moving in that.
Oh yeah.
You know, it's awesome, but like it also is really hard when like you as a worship pastor or leading, like the songs that people want to hear may not be the songs that you like. You know, like it's almost come to now that like worship music, like every other genre of music, there's like categories of it.
Yeah.
You know, and so like it's hard when. Yeah, and I've fallen victim to it of like, you're like, we just need to, you know, sing Psalm 23 or something.
Right.
You know, and the congregation doesn't want to hear that.
Right.
You know? And I think, you're totally right that we've fallen victim to like, this is what we're expecting.
Yeah.
This is what, and like, it's hard as like, because now that worship is a genre. There are worship.
Yeah.
Churches are now bands.
Yeah.
You know?
Yep.
Like churches are now going off and doing crazy concerts, which is hard sometimes because, you know, like you are coming to expect this.
And it becomes a weird line between when it's a big worship night and when it's like it's a concert of worship music that we've written.
Yeah, you can go, you know, and you hear someone and you're like, we sing this in my church, but right now I feel like I'm not allowed to say the words.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. Well, and that's the thing for me too, is like with tracks, I'm honestly more okay with using tracks outside of worship.
Yeah.
Like, I think in worship, it's really important that we're giving our best authentic self to God, right?
Yeah.
Sure.
If I'm going to a rock concert, like, I understand it because you have an audience who's showing up expecting to hear the sound of your band.
Yeah.
Right? So like that makes sense to me because there's some things that is like really hard to replicate live. I'm more okay with that than using them in a worship context.
Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah, and the reality is, as a worship leader, as a worship pastor, your job is first off to lead your congregation into the presence of
Absolutely.
God. Your second job is to create a spirit of worship
Yep.
within your congregation.
Yep.
So it's what kind of spirit are you trying to produce? Is it one that is authentic to your church? Because every church has a specific voice. Every church speaks out of its experiences, out of its just its history, everything. So the reality is, what kind of spirit are you trying to produce? And to answer Caleb's second question, because I have been around different churches throughout my life, and I mean, going back to kind of what you said too, Will, was like there is a moment, and we've all kind of mentioned this too as well, but like there's a performance level. Like tracks can sometimes, again, tracks aren't bad.
Right.
Don't let me say that, but like
Hear me say it.
Yeah. Here, Luke.
Like tracks aren't inherently evil.
No,
but what
they're not.
they can do is we can get trapped into the mindset that this is performance.
Yeah.
Because they add to it. I mean,
Right.
kind of how you said, like you feel more comfortable using tracks outside of the worship service, but you kind of feel a little hesitant with it in the worship
because
service.
it's not a performance.
Exactly.
It's like that line between making excellent sounding music and performing excellent sounding music.
And
Like,
from my experience, like when the church I had worked at previously years before, like they had started getting like really new in the worship things, like they started getting Dante for the first time and all this stuff. They started getting really good at it. And the congregation could tell that like the worship just kind of felt fake.
Yeah.
Like it was all performance based. Like people started comparing it to like a big concert show that they had gone to. They're like,
it's different.
They're like, I thought I was going to Sunday morning service.
Yeah.
And this
not the
doesn't
same.
feel like that. So I think, again, talking like tracks aren't bad. So as a worship leader and as a pastor, I think it's important to kind of ask yourself, what kind of spirit of worship are you creating by using these tracks?
Yeah.
Because again, context matters. The church you're at, maybe tracks are the way you go about it.
Yeah.
But if you're, and most likely it's the smaller churches who aren't going to be using tracks because they're just a little
They're
bit
not
more.
going to have the setup.
Yeah, they're not going to have the setup for it. Like, and that's okay.
Yeah.
I think some of the most memorable moments of worship in my life have included just a cajon and an acoustic guitar.
I was going to say the same thing.
Yeah.
Like some of the most memorable and meaningful times where I have met with God in worship were an acoustic guitar and the people around.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Like not even a sound system. You know, we're just there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think it's in those moments where we allow God to do His work. Like when we don't even come with an agenda, or just like we're just here with that spirit of worship.
Tracks or not, you know?
Right.
Yeah.
Well,
Absolutely.
Yeah, especially
Yeah,
just
like, I mean, that can happen no matter what. For somebody, it could be them going to a Hillsong concert with tracks, and they're like, I never felt God more than I felt Him right now. You know? The Spirit has to lead, and you have to come in with a heart.
Yeah.
You know,
That's
for
really
that.
important.
What were you saying?
But I was just saying that it's like when we just come with no agenda and we allow God to take control, and with Him to like, hey, here's where we're going.
Yeah.
And we allow Him to take the lead instead of us being like, oh, the track says we have to go to the chorus, so chorus too. Like no, we're gonna go here and we're gonna change songs.
Yeah.
And
Turn it off. Yeah.
We're who knows where we're going.
Yeah, you're like,
Yeah.
And
so
that's why I honestly like MDs
Yes.
more than using cues, because that allows flexibility on the spot.
Yep.
Like I don't mind using cues at all. I think they can be a really good tool, but I think having someone actively telling you what to do in the time is a lot better, because you can go with the flow of the service. a lot
Yes.
easier.
yeah.
But anyway, that's an aside that I had.
Yeah.
I love it. I love it.
You know, something that I want to say before we close out is, is that like, if you are like using tracks, nothing wrong with that. We, you know, we want to, no matter
I applaud you.
Yeah. Luke may not, but Caleb does. But you know, but our real thing is, it's like we don't substitute people for tracks.
Yeah.
You know, don't like. It's hard, and I know as a band, it's hard to ask. As
You
a
mean
worship,
don't substitute tracks for people?
Yeah. That is what I meant. Thank you.
Yep, I got you.
But you know, I know it's hard to get people volunteering
Yeah.
and active in a church, but like, the church is gonna feel God's Spirit way more when the people are on stage praising them and using their gifts and spirits. You know, like we joke about Keaton playing trombone on stage, but like, if Keaton was on stage playing trombone, everyone would probably be like, "Wow,
Whoa, they've got a trombone on stage.
yeah," and they're like,
And it's Keaton.
yeah,
who knew?
and like they're like, that person's using their gifts for God.
Yeah.
Yep.
Like that one sweet old lady will come up to Keaton and be like, "It was so wonderful seeing you praise the Lord today."
Well, and I've been in worship services where they've had like a trumpet player on
Yeah,
stage.
yeah.
Like it's cool.
And reality is, like, again, and kind of how this conversation has gone, we all have different and varying opinions about tracks.
Yeah.
It's not a black and white conversation. That's why, honestly, this is kind of a heated conversation within the church world. Because
Controversial.
we don't know how to handle this. And it just matters upon context. But Will, just to kind of sum up kind of what you said, and something I was thinking of is like, it's hard to find volunteers, and don't, substitute them with tracks. But like, think of it this way. You, Caleb, you've talked about it before. Your best way of experiencing God is by actually playing worship.
Yeah.
You're not the only one that experiences God that way.
Yeah.
So
There's gonna be
by filling that hole with an artificial track,
Sure.
you are by nature filling a hole in which somebody else could experience God in a unique way that resonates with them.
Yeah.
So again, volunteers are hard
Yeah.
to find, especially in the church world, especially now,
Right.
more than ever. But don't sacrifice.
Yeah.
Sacrifice that for tracks.
Yeah.
So
Well, and sorry, go ahead. Finish your thing.
No, you go ahead. I'm done.
I actually that's another thing I think about tracks is I actually like using them can deter you from finding volunteers. Like I know musicians who will not play with tracks.
Yep.
Yeah.
Like I have a couple of I have at least one friend that I can think of that like would not play on a worship team at a church that was using tracks.
Hates tracks
Like-
more than Luke.
Yes, legitimately, like he does. But not even just that, but also there can be the temptation to think like, well, they already have the sound. What do they need me for?
So true.
Like,
Yeah, the volunteer may be
Yeah.
afraid to ask.
yeah, it's like, well, they don't need it.
Yeah.
Like
They're
they
gonna
got the
sound better than
already.
me, so.
Yeah,
Yeah.
but
Well, we've had an amazing conversation talking about tracks. Luke,
Yeah.
again, where can they find you, and on what social media platforms?
yeah, you can check me out on YouTube at Everyday Church Guitarist.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'd love to see you over there.
Yeah, and if you do go over there, comment in his comments at Sound Doctrine.
Yeah, do that.
Yeah, and so
We know where you came from.
Yeah. We're just so glad that you were willing to come here and
Yes.
actually,
Yeah.
Thanks for coming.
Thank you.
man.
Thanks so
Yeah.
much for having me on. I appreciate it.
yeah,
We love it.
and being willing to record twice.
Absolutely.
You know, it was awesome. We're glad to have you as a first guest,
Yeah.
and it was great. I think this is a very practical episode for everyone, and maybe people just don't know tracks, and so
Could be.
or they want to learn and maybe put them in their church, or
Yeah.
they have tracks and they're like, maybe I shouldn't. You know, either way, no matter what,
Hey, who
we
knows?
hope that this episode has speak to you guys. So
Absolutely.
So keep on singing.
keep seeking.
And let Sound Doctrine lead the way.
We'll see you in the next
See you
one.
guys.
See you guys. Our show is brought to you by the Lantern Podcast Network through Wesley Seminary at Indiana Wesleyan University.
Thank you, Indiana Wesleyan University, for allowing us to use your podcast studio.
For more Christian content, check out the Lantern Podcast Network. And as always, keep singing.
Keep seeking.
And let Sound Doctrine lead the way.